What's up everyone, how are you all? Today we are back with What If Deku story. What if Deku was kidnapped as a child and returned 10 years later as a monster? If you enjoyed then please like, share and do comments. The event that took place during the summer training camp had produced results that no one foresaw. 11 injuries, ranging from minor to severe. 13 were injured. 1 had gone missing. The entire city, maybe even world, had taken the event and mucked up a mass media storm. How could UA, a school that was supposed to train future heroes, allow something like this to happen? Of course, the media was only interested in what would rile people up. All they heard was, villains, and, kidnapped, and they went to have their own field day. This time was different than the villain attack Class 1A had over at USJ. Where they had all been able to escape with minimal injuries, this time they had not. In fact, it was very possible a good amount of students could have died. Not only that, but a student had gone missing, number 14 of Class 1A, Izuku Midoriya. While everyone had voiced their concerns, worries and fears, it was the people who had saw him right before the kidnapping that made them think the worst. Izuku Midoriya was in critical condition. His limbs had been torn and bruised from overusing his quirk. The only reason he had gotten as far as he did was because of adrenaline. Now that he was in the clutches of the League of Villain, in such a state no less, would they show mercy on him? Every single one of Class 1A's students had those thoughts circling in their minds. Class 1A, minus Toru Hagakure, Kyoka Jiro, Momo Yaoyorozu and of course Izuku Midoriya, had all gathered inside of Katsuki Bakugo's hospital room. The boy had bandages around his hands, his brows furrowed deeply at them instead of acknowledging his classmates who had come in to wish him recovery. Mineta was holding a bag of bell peppers, as a melon would have been pretty pricey for Bakugo. "We got you some bell peppers," he spoke up, slicing through the thick silence. No responses. The class could only stare at each other in the awkward air. It wasn't until Eijiro Kirishima walked up to Bakugo's bedside, placing a hand on the railing and a fist forming in the other. "Look, this time around, let's save him." The sudden exclamation caused Bakugo to spin his head around and look at his classmate, dead in the eyes. Bakugo's mind began reeling. Thoughts of what had happened began playing back, vividly in front of him. Kachin. He couldn't see anything in that moment. He was trapped in some orb or whatever, but he could clearly hear that brat's annoying voice scream out his dumb nickname. Stupid Deku. What could he do anyways? At a blink of an eye, there was a loud bursting pop noise and Bakugo was back in the forest, stumbling backwards. He could only take in his surroundings for a few seconds, though it seemed like an eternity. People were behind and in front of him. His classmates who, for the love of God, he's never really known by name, were catching both his and Tokiyami's fall as they both were released from their ball imprisonment. The villains in front of him were retreating back into the black, misty portal except in one of their arms was Deku. The villain had his hand at Deku's throat, keeping a strong grip on his shoulder as well. Bakugo had noticed beforehand that the tentacle guy was carrying Deku around for a while, and the reason was evident. The amount of strain and injuries he received on his body was massive, absolutely destructive. Bakugo knew his quirk's limits, but obviously Deku didn't, or he chose to ignore them. Again, an idiot. His brain finally caught up to speed as he watched Deku be taken by the villains in his stead. Bakugo's arm went out, flickers of explosions readying itself desperately as the villains retreated. "Deku!" he screamed out. In that instant, only he saw the lights reflecting in Izuku's eyes. Glimmers of tears accompanied a small, shaky smile. "Kachin, I'm so glad," the boy whispered softly, maybe low enough to make sure he didn't heard, but he fucking heard it. And with that, the portal closed. The students was left in the forests by themselves, taking in the utter defeat. Anger, frustration, concern, more anger, and also some anger had whirled around in Bakugo's chest. He was never one to express his emotions honestly, and not to strangers even if they were classmates at the very least. He didn't know what he wanted at the moment, everything about the night seemed like a really bad dream. "Look, Todoroki and I were here yesterday, and we happened to hear a conversation with Yaoyorozu and..." Kirishima rubbed the back of his head while Todoroki took the lead to explain. He looked down at Bakugo, meeting fiery eyes with his cool ones. "She placed a tracking device on one of those monsters. Yaoyorozu is giving the police one to track them down." he explained softly as the other classmates listened. Tenya Iida, or who Bakugo considered as Fast Four Eyes, had grabbed a hold of both Kirishima and Todoroki's shoulders. We can't. This is a matter we should leave to the professionals. This isn't something we as students should be meddling in. He nearly screamed out, but a chorus of hushing noises helped Iida catch his voice. Kirishima could only grimace and clutch at his chest. Damn it man, I know that. But I still couldn't do anything. You didn't either. The jab caught Iida stricken, both students clenched their fists. We heard Bakugo was being targeted but we couldn't do anything. I didn't do anything about it. And everyone got hurt and Midoriya got. He stopped himself, swallowing hard. If I don't do something about it here, then I won't be able to call myself a hero. Everyone around had tried to hush the students until he turned back to Bakugo. Listen, everyone knows you and Midoriya's got some weird beef or whatever, but you've known him the longest, right? He risked his life to save yours, so it's only right that we go and save him. The class went quiet. Bakugo went back to stare at his hands, pondering, aggressively thinking. He too stayed quiet, since he had no idea what to say or what his honest self was telling him. His mind grew dizzy again. The reality of the situation was more than he could ever take in. The class only waited for Bakugo's response, but he had already tuned everyone out. Visions of the past played once again. Kacchan, are you hurt? Can you get up? Shut up, Deku. Because, I couldn't just stand around and watch you die. Shut up. Deku. Kacchan, I'm so glad. A roar of anguish filled the room as Bakugo clenched his bandaged fists and banged them down on the bed repeatedly. The entire class jumped in shock, some even escaped out of the room. He continued to beat his hands down again and again, each time with more vigor fueled by hatred. Every fucking time he goes and pulls some shit like this. I didn't ask for fucking help and he looks at me like I'm some weakling that needs saving. I would have been fine if they took me. So if he's all powerful and great, then he should be able to get himself out of that shit. I ain't gonna help that son of a bitch, he can die for all I care. He screamed out. Bakugo's face was towards the bed, but every single one of the classmates still inside the room had felt the vicious, frontal attack from where they were. The shocked silence was broken by footsteps approaching Bakugo's bed and a hard slap. Uraraka's eyes brimmed with tears but her eyebrows furrowed in anger and disgust. Whether you wanted it or not, Deku risked everything to save you. That's something a real hero would do, and if you're going to look down on that, then you should quit now. You're not hero material. Tears rolled down her cheeks as she turned and stormed out of the room, followed by a few of the other classmates until only Kirishima stayed there next to Bakugo's side. He didn't move from when Uraraka slapped him. The time to be furious had passed. Deep down, Bakugo knew he didn't mean what he said, at least not the last part. He was always one to talk about killing and death, but never would he choose to take someone's life. Bakugo was being defensive, there were too many people there and he wasn't able to share how he really felt. If Deku did die then, Bakugo, Kirishima whispered softly. He turned his head to look up at him. I know that, you don't mean that. Whether you come or not, me and Todoroki are leaving tonight. His words became softer, Kirishima's eyes looking to the ground as well. Maybe I'm wrong, maybe you don't care about him. But he sure as hell cared about you and he's our classmate and friend. I'm still inviting you because, well, I think you do want to rescue him too. Bakugo turned his face away from the redhead. Get out. Kirishima blinked in surprise before sighing, rubbing the back of his neck. He turned on his heels to the door and with one look at Bakugo, he left. It was true though, he did want to rescue Deku. He didn't want Kirishima to see him blink away frustrated tears before letting them out with a cry. Bakugo had taken the party by surprise when he met with the students outside of the hospital. Kirishima's face had lit up, giving him a bright grin as they discussed what their plan of action was. The rescue team was Kirishima, Todoroki, Bakugo, Yaoyorozu and even Iida. While the class president was there to persuade them to stop what they were doing, he was convinced by the idea of a non-combat rescue mission and a quick chat with Todoroki. No one really heard what they were talking about, out of privacy, but Bakugo was able to hear Todoroki softly say, you know, if you were the one kidnapped, he'd try to rescue you. Everyone in class knew that Deku's friends were mainly Iida and Uraraka, and even though Bakugo didn't know this, it seemed like the bonds Deku had made were as strong as steel. Bakugo wondered, if it were anyone else, would Iida have agreed to come along despite the potential risks? He answered it with a no. With Yaoyorozu's tracking device, they pinpointed the chip to be located in the Kamino ward. The bullet train ride to the region was awkward, filled with a kind of silence that was only broken up by discussion between Iida and Todoroki. They sat across from each other, and while Todoroki and Kirishima were eating at their store-bought meals, Iida expressed his position as watchman to all of them. I want all of you to remember what we're doing is extremely dangerous and that we are to avoid combat at all cost. He had directed most of the speeches to Bakugo, who only grunted and sneered in response. Listen up, Four Eyes, I don't give a shit about what you say, but I'm not going to run in without a plan. Bakugo crossed his arms and glared him down, which only gave Iida more fuel to spout his speeches. Everyone knew him to be the person with the least likeliness to cooperate, but he wasn't an idiot. Bakugo understood it was virtually impossible to achieve their mission without relying on each other, much to his dismay. They all had ended up with a disguise. Dumb disguises is what Bakugo thought as he tugged on his collar and scratched at the beanie they had him put on. He was ready to tear apart the sunglasses and fake goatee until Kirishima had reassured he looked like a super cool dude. Bakugo left it alone but nearly socked Kirishima in the face when he tried to get him to do some sort of accent. Lucky for him, Kirishima always knew when to activate his quirk to protect himself from Bakugo's fists. All four of them walked towards the tracking point's location, with Iida constantly reminder of to not engage in any form of combat. In order to keep suspicion from the regular pedestrians, they all had crammed themselves into the side of the building the tracking device had pointed to. Kirishima had brought out a pretty expensive night vision camera and hoisted himself on top of Todoroki's shoulders. Bakugo followed, stepping onto Iida's shoulders despite his unwillingness. When they saw that only Numas were inside of the facility, everyone's hearts sank. While no one knew what the Numas were, from the many they've fought and seen, everyone understood that they weren't normal. Was it possible that Deku was inside of this facility as well? With the Numas, everything that occurred next happened in a blink of an eye. Mount Lady had come with other pro-heroes and police enforcement to smash the building down and rescue and retain those that were inside the building. The destruction left the five of them stunned, scrambling up on the ledge to see what was happening. Mount Lady, gang the Orca, even no. Four-hero best genist is there. Kirishima shouted. As the pro-heroes rounded up all the Numas and rescued those who were taken, Iida announced that they should all leave it to them and head back now. He seemed far too happy to leave, but Bakugo stayed put. There was something off. Something in the air was telling Bakugo that it wasn't going to be this easy. Something inside Bakugo's stomach churned, and before he knew it, wham! If possible, I'd like to ask for you all to stop interfering. The aura around them dropped. It was almost as if they had come face to face with the Reaper themselves. All five of them had their backs to the wall. The entire block had been destroyed in 1 second. The sound of slow clapping lingered as the man in the dark praised best genist. As expected of the No. 4 hero. I was trying to blast everyone away, but in an instant you controlled everyone's clothes and pulled them out of the way. Your judgment, your technique, you've got nerve of steel. Isn't that so, Izuku? Bakugo froze. Every single of them had heard what the man had said, yet no one's body would move. Every single one of them was paralyzed by fear, Bakugo included. Yaoyorozu had vomited to the side. That's definitely best genist for you. Not only does he have a versatile quirk that can affect anyone who's wearing clothes, he's also known for his swift judgment. The voice was Izuku Midoriya's. Every single one of them recognized it. It was Bakugo who finally turned his head to see Deku standing there, next to the man in the dark suit. He looked fine. His injuries were gone, he was smiling like he was back at school with his friends, but something was off. Deku was in his hero outfit, but wasn't at the same time. It was a darker, black version of what he wore with modifications. While his face still seemed soft, there was something about his eyes that made him look tired. Black liquid began forming and spilling out villains, those specifically from the League. The guy with the hands, Bakugo remembered it was something like Shigaraki, landed in front of the man who seemed to be death himself. Tamura, I know your goal was to take the Bakugo boy, but I'd like you to know you did not fail with your replacement. The man placed a hand onto Deku's shoulder. Bakugo was ready to stand up and run over when Iida placed a hand on him, shaking his head as he covered his own mouth. He gritted his teeth, hands balling into fists as he stood there, watching like some sort of bystander. You've actually found us the key to success. With Izuku, we can finally rip apart one for all. Shigaraki Tamura only slouched himself, scratching at his neck. Sensei, I didn't know you had such tremendous power. Before he could say anything else, All Might had appeared and tried to land a hit on the man. The fight ensured. Bakugo couldn't keep an eye on everything that was going on, from the man, to All Might, to Tamura, to Deku. I want you to remember, Tamura. You can still grow so much more. My gift to you is this boy, he will be the key to your success. With his fingers, it zipped over to the unconscious Warp Gate villain, forcing his quirk to activate. Izuku, go with Tamura. But, Sensei, Deku looked up at him before All Might came back. Oh, no you don't. I'll be rescuing Midoriya. The man fended off All Might, throwing him onto his back. The Warp Gate grew larger as the suited man used whatever his quirk was to pull the villains into the Black Warp Gate. Before any of them could get in, Bakugo finally sprung up and over the wall. Deku! He screamed out, using his explosions to propel himself towards the gate. All Might turned towards Bakugo, shocked before he yelled out. Bakugo! Get back now! Before he knew it, Deku's body jolted forward towards Bakugo despite the magnetism, and punched him square in the face. He hit the wall, cracking the cement as the other students jumped over the wall to assist him. The man turned towards them. Oh, Izuku, is this the boy you've been telling me about? Deku nodded in response, a grin appearing on his face. Yeah, this is Kacchan. He replied. The man only chuckled, turning back to All Might. Very well. Tamura, I'll send Izuku to you soon. I'm sure right now he has his own battle to face. With that, Tamura and the other villains were pulled into the Black Warp Gate, leaving Izuku Midoriya standing there, grinning towards Katsuki Bakugo. All Might's voice rang through the battleground. What did you do to him? One hero ran towards the man, throwing a punch which was blocked. Not much, really. I only tweaked with some memories. Don't worry though, he still idolizes you. I couldn't get rid of that. The man chuckled and black lines from his fingertip charged at All Might. Izuku, I'll let you have your fight. Thank you sensei. Deku's face lit up, almost like a child who was given permission to eat another cookie. It pissed off Bakugo. What the fuck Deku? What's wrong with you? Brainwashed huh? Just do the thing you did back at the sports festival and snap out of it. Bakugo screamed out, his personal rage fueling him to act without thinking. Iida and Kirishima had helped him back up, all of them keeping their eyes on Deku. Todoroki called out after him. Midoriya, we're here to rescue you. Whatever's going on, you can pull through. Deku only blinked in confusion as the man laughed while fighting All Might. The destruction from the two's fight was overwhelming, but there was nothing the UA students could do unless they wanted to leave behind Deku. Huh, I don't know who you are, but it seems like you know me. I didn't know Kacchan had friends. Deku furrowed his brow, fists clenching. Wow, that's really amazing huh Kacchan. It's been only a year since we've seen each other and you're here with friends. While I'm alone. Bakugo's eyes widened. What the fuck was going on? Yaoyorozu placed a hand on his shoulder. He doesn't know us, only you Bakugo. I think he definitely is brainwashed in some way, but there could be more to this, she explained, biting her lip as she watched her classmate slowly turn his smile into a frown. He still has his personality, talk to him, Midoriya's one to talk. Bakugo didn't want to fucking talk, he wanted to really punch Deku in the face right now. Yaoyorozu was right though, there seemed to have been some kind of brainwash in play. If it was similar to Shinso's brainwashing then that means there must be some sort of limit or trigger to release the quirk. The others seemed to have realized that too, so the best form of action right now was to keep Midoriya talking, maybe even taunt him closer. It would be risky and any assurance of the mission being non-combat was out the window. You said a year huh? I don't even remember the last time we saw each other. You're just that small to me. Bakugo yelled out, grinning as he got his hands ready. That seemed to bring Deku's face back to a soft, nervous look. Iida, on the other hand, was not as pleased. Do you remember back in middle school? We both were applying to UA and you told me that I couldn't do anything since I was quirkless. Deku looked down and clenched his fists. And then, do you remember what you told me? You said, hey, I know a way for you to get a quick. Maybe if you jump off the school roof you can die and be reborn with a quirk. Bakugo's face dropped. His classmates turned to look at him, terrified. Did you say that to him? Todoroki whispered softly. The silence and then the sound of a swallow gave them the answer. Well, I wasn't going to at first, but as I was walking home I got taken by a villain, a sludge monster. All Might came to save me actually, and I asked him, you know, me and you look up to him so much, and he was there in front of me. So I had to ask, if it was possible I could still be a hero even without a quirk. All Might had heard every word and tried to call out to him but was silenced by Sensei and the destruction going around. He told me I couldn't. And deep down I knew that too, but for some reason I felt that All Might would have told me that, maybe I could have been. So I went back to school, went up to the roof and did exactly what you told me to do. Deku looked up to stare at Bakugo, dead on. I didn't die, but I was reborn. Sensei found me and he told me that I could be a hero. Then he gave me a quirk. So now I can be a hero, and to prove it, I'm going to defeat you, Kacchan. Deku clenched his fists and charged towards the students. Kacchan, stunned, quickly got into a stance to take him on. For the first time though, he wasn't able to smile. Before either of them could do anything, Todoroki placed up a giant wall of ice to keep Deku from coming. If he doesn't know us, he won't know our quirk, we have to leave, now. He explained sternly to his classmates, ushering them up. What? No. I can beat him. I'll knock him out and then we'll take him back. Bakugo screamed as the ice shattered, a fist coming through it. Todoroki quickly used his flames to melt the shards that were flung by the impact. None of them were in their hero outfits, it was too dangerous to fight, especially with All Might and the man having their destructive battle so close. We need to go, now. Todoroki yelled out, pulling them all back. Deku stared at all of them, causing all of them to freeze as their hearts dropped. In that instant, Izuku Midoriya looked like he was ready to kill. I'm not letting you go that easy, Kacchan. Another fist came down but was blocked by Kirishima's arm. There was a cracking noise as Kirishima yelled out in pain. Fuck. He's too strong. The hardening wore off and was replaced with a bruised, bloodied arm. Bakugo looked at it, gritting his teeth. There was no other option. They had to get out of there. It'll be okay, they'll get out, regroup, they'll rescue Deku later. He was alive and that's what was important. Even if the fucking idiot got himself brainwashed. But now, they had to leave in order to give All Might a chance to win. Everyone look away. Bakugo held his hands close, pointing out towards Deku. Everyone turned as he unleashed a concentrated explosion at Deku, who blocked it with his arms. The boy flew back onto the ground as Bakugo grabbed a hold of Iida's shirt. Fucking go. He cried out, Iida nodding in response. They all grabbed onto Iida as he used his quirk to swiftly get out of the area of action. Oh no you don't. Deku gotten up and jumped towards them, a fist ready to land when all of a sudden All Might appeared to block the punch. Get out of here. I'll take care of the rest. All Might grabbed onto Deku's hand and punched him in the face, sending him flying backwards once again. I'm sorry Midoriya, my boy. He turned towards the children who have raced off, away from the action and into the streets. No one knew how long it took them to get away so quickly, but everyone's minds began reeling as they were stuck in a crowd who were being escorted by police officers and other traffic control mediators. No one said a word to one another as they were being funneled into the main streets as helicopters flew in every direction towards the fight. Everyone directed themselves towards the screens up on high buildings as they went from whatever commercial they were playing to the fight at hand. From high above, they were able to see both All Might and Deku. His voice was low, but audible when projected on the loudspeakers. You were my hero. I've always wanted to be like you All Might, so why didn't you tell me I could be a hero? He screamed out, getting his fists ready. The man in dark suit came over, placing a hand onto Deku's shoulder. All Might grimaced deeply, his fist shaking. No Midoriya, that's not what happened. He yelled out. How could All for One erase all of the memories from that point? How was he able to implant new ones? Who had that ability and what were the ways to dispel the effects? All Might continued to reach out to Deku. You can be a hero. You are a hero. Izuku Midoriya. I know you. His eyes widened, tears glistening. All Might, you're only saying that now cause I'm in front of you, with a quirk, with a power. Why didn't you tell me that before? Deku screamed out. He ran toward him but was quickly stopped by All for One. That's enough for you Izuku, go back to Tamura. He placed a warp gate behind them as Izuku reluctantly got in. Sensei, what about you? His voice shook before All for One looked back to All Might. Whatever happens to me, Tamura will succeed me. Help him. Deku nodded his head and went into the gate. No. All Might raced towards the warp gate but was stopped when All for One aimed a destructive blow towards a civilian. At the last second, All Might turned to protect the woman, and then lost his form. Bakugo watched the events unfold. He listened to words like, successor, and, All for One, and didn't understand anything that was going on. Even when All Might's true form was revealed, he cried out for him to win. As other heroes came to help and lighten the load, Bakugo heard the man say something but the speakers cut off. Only All Might heard this in the moment. Izuku Midoriya, the boy you passed it to huh. To be honest, I was going to kill him and make him feel every bit ounce of regret. But the opportunity presented itself. Isn't it sweeter? To see the boy who was going to be your successor, fall into my hands. I'll be honest, when I saw him, I swear he was my younger brother for a second. He laughed. It won't matter what the results are now. You lose either way. To be a teacher is to help your pupil stand up by himself. It seems you haven't been doing that good of a job. It might have been a result from your previous teacher. The last moment of the fight gave an incredulous explosion. It ended with a United States of Smash. It ended with one fist raised into the air. It ended with cheers from every part of the nation. It was victory, victory for everyone else except the chosen few. If Izuku Midoriya had been watching next to him, Bakugo was certain he'd be crying endless amount of tears. He wasn't there, however, which meant what the five of them ultimately had sought to do ended in a complete failure. The next morning the world was in a state of chaos. Bakugo and the others had all gone their separate ways, quiet, deep in thought, and in mourning. Everyone had been able to go back home to their families, except for Deku. The road to his house was familiar to Bakugo, walking past it every time he went to elementary school in the past and on the occasions where he had come over to grab Deku for their daily adventures as children. As he walked past the Midoriya's household, he couldn't help but see the police vehicles lined up outside. He knew what that meant. He could also hear Deku's mom crying loudly, begging for help from the police who were trying to reassure her the best to their abilities. Bakugo grabbed at his shirt, gripping it tightly as he gritted his teeth. He tried to keep walking but stopped a few feet away from the house. He doubled over, eyes brimming but refusing to let them stream. He held his breath behind pulled back teeth. Bakugo wasn't going to scream. He didn't need to as the sound of Inko Midoriya's wails of sorrow echoed through the neighborhood. He wasn't strong enough to save Deku. They had to run away like pathetic losers. Bakugo didn't know what was a better scenario. The fact that Deku could be dead versus Deku being brainwashed into a villain. If it was him, he'd rather be dead than turn villain. Of course he'd fight his ways out first, but would rather die trying than anything else. To be forced into being a villain, now that was something that set him off. It was disgusting. Bakugo would have never admit it out loud, but Deku's passion for becoming the best hero rivaled his own. It wasn't the first time Izuku Midoriya sat next to Shigaraki Tamura. So close, and so threatening. This time, the boy some people called Deku was sitting in a wooden chair, his hands and legs restraining back as Tamura pulled up a bar chair and sat in front of him. This time was different than the first for obvious reasons, but the main struggle ran through Deku's mind: how do I get out of this situation? There were no civilians that Tamura could threaten Deku with, but there were about 5 other villains that loomed over him, watching every single one of his movements. It wasn't like he could move much anyways. Deku was starting to feel all of the pain that had saved itself for a time. He wasn't running around fueled on a great heaping pile of adrenaline. He was in no condition to fight. Well, this isn't what I wanted. Not at all. Tamura's head dipped low, a hand moving back to scratch his neck idly. But, now that you're here, I'm sure we can figure something out. Deku kept his head low, thinking of a strategy as he waited. There wasn't much for him to do at that moment since there were so many villains surrounding him and he didn't know all of their quirks. He knew for certain that Tamura in front of him could disintegrate once he got all his fingers wrapped around him. Okay, avoid his hands. But the bartender over to the side with the mist floating around him was a tricky one. Warp gates for teleportation means that he'll be able to bring in reinforcements. It was too risky to move even with just him around. As for every other villain inside that room, there was no room for guesses. What Deku didn't know, he didn't know. The possibility of escape was slim. The best course of action would be keeping himself alive long enough till he's rescued. You know, I really want to kill you. Tamura's voice felt like a knife cutting through him. Deku shivered, but kept his face hard, unwilling to cooperate. But I'm thinking that you're going to be great bait now, for All Might. He rubbed his neck, leaning over his chair with a hand reached out. Deku winced, moving his head farther back as the fingers approached him. I was thinking, right, that we use Bakugo and get him to join us. His strength, his entire character screams a villain. Tamura explained, laughing. You're wrong. Deku spat out, biting his lip right after. Kacchan would never be persuaded to be a villain. He aims for the top, to be the #1 pro hero. Just like All Might. He didn't mention the name, knowing very well from the last time he and Tamura met that the villain absolutely detested him. Bringing him up might be a bad choice of words. Well, it doesn't matter what he wanted. I would have given him the option to join, but if he still refused, we would have made him anyways. You, though, I was thinking, and hear me out. He placed 2 fingers on Deku's forehead. Wouldn't it be better for the story, if the person that turned villain was the hero? Deku swallowed. What is he saying? Like, how much more fun would that be? Sure, we take the kid that already seems like a villain, turn him into a villain, but you. Mr. #1's fanboy. Imagine if you were the one to turn into a villain. Tamura explained, his teeth showing as a wide grin spread across his face, the same one that left Deku shivers down his spine back at the shopping outlet. You know how much more people would despair. How much All Might would despair. When he said his name, Tamura's voice was lowered and laced with disgust. No, I'm never going to be a villain. No matter what you do. Deku screamed out, his eyes already brimming with tears. He came so far to become a hero, there was no way they can persuade him, no matter what kind of quirk one of them had. If it was a brainwashing quirk again, he'll figure something out. There was a limit too, he just had to exploit it to the best he can. He could do this, his spirit was strong, it's always been strong, Deku just had to. Tamura. The voice came from a screen. Everyone turned to look at the source of the fuzzy voice. Shigaraki Tamura got out of his seat and headed over to the screen. Sensei, I need your help. I think it's time to get little Midoriya on our side. Tamura held his hands out, similar to a child pleading for a toy. A wise decision, Tamura. I'll prepare. In the meantime, break his spirit. The voice on the screen went dead, and Deku's eyes shot up as Tamura straightened his back. He turned and headed over to Deku, eyes widen with madness as he grabbed a hold of Deku's shoulders, one pinky up. You should be lucky, getting a private lesson from Sensei himself. At least before then, I can play around with you for a bit. The pinky went down. All fingers were on Deku's shoulder and his clothes had started tearing away, then his skin. Stop! Deku screamed out, feeling his shoulder be torn apart slowly, crumbling away as the muscles below it blistered and screeched. He had seen Aizawa Sensei's elbow been touched and disintegrated, but the feeling was so much worse than it looked. He gritted his teeth, trying not to scream and give Tamura the satisfaction, but once he placed his other hand on the other shoulder, Deku cried out, tears rolling down his face as both of his shoulders began disintegrating slowly. It was only his shoulders, but it felt like his entire body was being pulled apart, piece by piece. It didn't feel like someone was pulling away a whole piece, but instead someone was grabbing at Deku's skin, pulling it out, and cutting small pieces at a time while keeping their grip. The pain was nearly unbearable. If Deku didn't have a high tolerance for pain, he might have passed out, even considering the wounds and bruises he sustained while fighting Muscular earlier. Deku moved a bit down on his lip, to try and focus on that pain as blood seeped down both his shoulders and now his bottom lip. In his head he screamed, louder and louder. I'm sorry, Mom. I'm sorry, All Might. I'm sorry everyone, please. Tears continued to roll down his cheek, his shoulders looking nothing like red, bloody splotches before Tamura let go. I can't wait to meet the changed you. Make sure you thank Sensei for his gift. Consider it the best kind of power-up. Tamura's grin appeared once more as black, gooey liquid came pouring out of Deku's mouth and enveloped him, transporting him away. Tamura looked down at the empty chair, grinning before he turned towards the door. A knock. Pizza delivery. He only grinned wider. Everything was black. The darkness was heavy and it didn't feel like the usual darkness of the night. He had ended up on the floor somewhere, hard and cold. Concrete probably. Deku's body screamed out in agony, as the waves of nerves splitting from his shoulders transported its way down to his entire nervous system. He nearly choked out a sob before hearing a cold, elderly voice. "Oh dear, that Tamura did quite a job on you, didn't he? Don't mind him, he seemed to be very excited by you being here." Out of the darkness stepped an older man, with a deformed face and a dark suit dressed him well. Deku felt the air turn extremely cold, the atmosphere become dangerously ill. This man screamed of pure evil. Deku tried to move himself away, but screamed out in pain as his body twisted onto itself, both from his shoulder wounds and previous overexertion. "Don't worry now, let me help you." The man leaned down and placed his hand on Deku's face. His eyes widened before he felt his entire body tense up. An almost cooling, calming wave spread across his entire body, fixing his wounds both externally and internally. It wasn't like Recovery Girl's power where it sped up a person's healing process. This quirk was a healing quirk altogether that had no repercussions. It felt too good, almost enough for Deku to sigh and smile in relief, but considering he was being healed by the villain, the feeling was bittersweet. His body rebuilt itself, patching up every last wound that he accumulated over the course of the few days. Deku couldn't help but feel refreshed. "Your face." The man spoke up, reminding Deku where he was and that the man's hand was still on his face. "That's strange. This might sound odd, but your face reminds me of my younger brother." Deku's eyes widened at the implication. He slowly turned towards him, swallowing hard as his voice refused to be let out. He did his best to stutter out a, "Are you, all for one?" The man only grinned. Deku froze. This was the man that All Might was destined to fight and defeat. No, it was the man that Deku had to defeat. Everything One for All accumulated to was in order to stop this evil that was now standing in front of him. "So you are my brother." "I suppose not technically, but," the man's hand left Deku's and went down to his arm, helping him up and steadying the boy. If Deku didn't know anything was that going on, it was almost as if a kind gentleman had given him assistance off the floor. "You are so much like him. Tell me, Izuku, before receiving One for All, what was your quirk?" Deku refused to say anything. Whether it was from defiance or pure terror, he couldn't open his mouth. A hand went up to his forehead, a thumb onto his forehead gave All for One the answer. "Quirkless. You really are my brother, aren't you? Izuku, you have no idea how happy it makes me to know that you will be alongside Tamura now. When I was younger, I longed for my brother to be by my side. Finally, I can live through Tamura and you." Before Deku could react, the man wrapped his arms around him in an embrace. Deku didn't know what was happening. He was terrified, frozen with absolute horror as this name, the one that is deemed the purest of evils, was hugging him like they were old friends. "Now then, let's get to work." Two hands grabbed a hold of Deku's head as his entire mind blacked out. Izuku Midoriya sniffed. The young boy, only about the age of 5, sat on the ground with bruises and cuts from scraping the ground. Looking up he saw Katsuki Bakugo, his hands cupped as small explosions lit up. A few other of students from their preschool had gathered around to watch him use his quirk. "See Deku, my quirk is so much cooler. I can beat you now, but when you get your quirk, I'll still beat you." He laughed before walking away. Right, when Izuku gets his quirk, he'll be able to become a great hero. He'll rival Bakugo. He'll be just like All Might. Except, he never got his quirk. Time flashed forward. The constant teasing from Bakugo became more and more degrading, but Izuku had held onto his All Might action figure and shouted back once. "Just you wait, Kachan. I can still be a hero. Even without a quirk." The phrase was met with an explosion to the face and led Izuku on the ground. "Shut up, Deku. You're useless. Quirkless piece of shit." He laughed. Izuku hated the name Deku. More time flashed. He was going to apply for UA, despite everyone's disbelief. Even if he was quirkless, they had changed the rules to state that even people without a quirk were able to apply. Even if no one had been accepted on those merits, there was still a chance. Hey, I got an idea, if you really want a quirk, why don't you swan dive off the roof and die? Then you can reborn with one. Izuku winced, staring at Kacchan with tears brimming in his eyes, as usual. The fierce boy only threatened him with more explosions. It wasn't like Izuku hadn't thought about something like that before. Every night he considered ways to obtain a quirk. Maybe if he threw himself into a vast of toxic waste. No, it was okay. Because he could become a hero without one, right? Life at home was quiet. Both his parents went across borders to work, but Izuku knew it was because they wanted nothing to do with him. He never knew his father much anyways, but Izuku could tell that his mother felt guilty about not being able to pass down her quirk to him. He didn't care if he was quirkless, he just wished his mother showed him more support. He had finally met his idol. On a rare chance that Izuku was taken by a villain, and out of all of the heroes that could have rescued him, it was the one and only All Might. Izuku had to take the chance presented to him. He had to ask him, the person he looked up to the most, and the person who will tell him what he wanted to hear. Even if I don't have a quirk, can I still be a hero? The now, frail-looking All Might only shook his head. Rejection. Flat-out refusal. His no. One hero, All Might had told him no, he could never be a hero. Deep down, Izuku should have known this. He knew deep down that it was impossible for him, so why did he hold on to hope for so long? Why did All Might tell him no? Why? Why couldn't he be a hero? Izuku had walked straight to school after that. He climbed up onto the school roof and looked down at the city he longed to protect. Tears rolled down his eyes as he looked at the hero notebook he'd been creating for himself. When he becomes a hero, there was no use for it. He threw it off the roof, flinging it over the fence, crying out loudly as he watched his dream disappear into the ground below. Izuku took a moment to reconsider what he was doing. What was he doing? There wasn't anything left for him. He was useless, quirkless. There wasn't anything Izuku wanted to be but a hero, and he couldn't. It was reality now. He took the time to think of those around him. He didn't have any friends, and Kacchan was the one that suggested the plan really, so he wouldn't care if he left the earth. His parents had left him long ago, and now his one shining hope had gave him the slap in the face reality has been trying to scream at him for the longest time. He wondered if there were heroes who specialized in suicide prevention. Izuku never recalled hearing about a hero like that, which made him laugh. He was too useless to even be saved by something like this. There was no one left in the world for him, no one to protect. He truly believed that maybe if he did jump, he could be reborn. With one hand on the fence, he began climbing up on it. No one stopped him, either because they didn't see him or no one truly cared anyways. That's what Izuku thought. Sitting on top of the wired fence, he tried to think of reasons to get himself down, to stop what he was doing. I like eating katsudon, if I die I can't eat that, he told himself, but frowned. He could eat some if he was reborn anew, maybe he'd like something else. I really like my shoes. He could jump with his shoes on, maybe he'd be reborn with them. Everything Izuku thought was minimal, absolutely useless, just like him. Even he wasn't able to think of ways to prevent himself from jumping. He couldn't even save himself. With one last look to the sky, he tried to imagine All Might, in his hero form, coming towards him and stopping him. Grabbing him and holding him, telling him that he's wanted and he's still someone with passion. You can still be a hero. He wished for that to happen, but once he was plummeting to the ground, he realized that no one was going to rescue him. Maybe he just wasn't worth being saved. At the last second, Izuku closed his eyes, tranquility washing over him. When he opened his eyes, he was on a bed. A man with a scarred face and a black suit sat beside him. Next to him was a young man, older than Izuku, with gray hair and chapped lips. Izuku's hand flew behind him, his instincts kicking in. He tried to find his backpack to offer the young man some Vaseline that he always kept in the front pocket. It was great for cuts and wounds that he got often as a child. You're awake. Young man, you gave us quite a scare. The man spoke, leaning over to look at him. Where am I? That's what Izuku had wanted to say, but instead, the first thing that comes out of his mouth is, I'm sorry. The younger man raised an eyebrow. You take a jump off a roof and you're apologizing. Geez, how fucking twisted are you? The older man didn't say anything to that, he kept his face turned to Izuku. Tell me, dear boy, why did you do it? Izuku's heart ached as he spilled all of his feelings out to two strangers. Everything from his goal to be a hero, to the constant bullying for being quirkless, to how he came home to no one, to finally meeting All Might and then being told he couldn't be a hero. His life was shattered at that instant, life was no longer meaningless. All Might, huh? What a joke. The younger man hissed out, placing his fists on the bed, keeping his fingers away. Listen kid, just became that excuse of a hero told you that you couldn't be one, doesn't mean you listen. His voice grew with animosity, something Izuku hadn't heard before when talking about the No. 1 Pro Hero. Izuku Midoriya, it seems that we stopped you from death, but what will you do now? The older man asked. Izuku sat up in the bed, gripping the blanket and biting his lip. Nothing changed really, his resolve to die was still there. He was silent. Izuku. The man spoke again, using his first name fondly. It almost felt like a father who was giving his son advice. What if I told you that you can be a hero? Izuku turned to face the man. But how? He asked, tears brimming again. I don't have a quirk. What if I told you I could give you one? The room went silent. Izuku stared at him, then to the younger man to see if he was bluffing in some sort, if this was all a practical joke. So many questions ran through the young boy's mind. Too many questions. Why me? Was all Izuku managed to say, clutching at his chest. Because, from just knowing you now, I know that your passion is true. You have the heart of a hero, and I can't sit idly by and watch you destroy your life. So if you'll agree, join me. Us. I'll make sure that you become a hero that's even better than All Might. One that will look to a child and tell them, you can be a hero. A hand extended. With a sniff and a sob, Izuku accepted. Izuku. All for one spoke up, letting go of Deku's head. The black goo wrapped itself around the young boy, leaving only his face there as a new hero suit was placed on him. It was the one that Izuku had imagined for himself, but with alterations Sensei provided. His new implanted memories will adjust soon, and for good measurement, Sensei had given him a hidden quirk that would pair nicely with his newfound, altered mind. Sensei. Deku looked up, then from left and right. Sensei. Where are we? What's going on? We're at the Numu base. It appears that we have been found by the heroes. You were stunned for a while, do you remember anything? He asked, not really interested in an actual response before turning towards the front of the building. They would come soon. I remember being with Tomu-chan, did Kurogiri transported me here? He asked, concern growing as he clenched his fists and got ready for whoever was coming. The building had been brought down by Mt. Lady. Deku had put himself in front of his sensei to block whatever debris would be flying over there. Let me handle this Izuku. All for one spoke before walking out of the dark side of the building they were. Even with Beast Genist's intuition, Deku knew that it was no use for his sensei. The musculoskeletal coiling matched with air propulsion had sent the pro-heroes flying backwards, destroying the neighborhood they were in. Noticing that Best Genist had taken his comrades out of the blast range, Sensei laughed and began clapping. As expected of the No. 4 hero. I was trying to blast everyone away but in an instant you controlled everyone's clothes and pulled them out of the way. Your judgment, your technique, you've got nerve of steel. Isn't that so, Izuku? The young boy beamed, following his sensei out into the light. That's definitely Best Genist for you. Not only does he have a versatile quirk that can affect anyone who's wearing clothes, he's also known for his swift judgment. That could never be taken from his knowledge and admiration for heroes. It was one thing Sensei felt needed to stay. From then on, the battle ensured. Tamura had been brought over with the other villains, much to his relief. He was ready to leave though, reluctant knowing he had to assist Tamura in any way he could until All Might came crashing in, saying his name. It made his stomach churn. He didn't need saving, and never from him. That time had passed. Deku. Now that was a name he hadn't heard in a very long time. Everyone in the base referred to him as Izuku, sometimes Iskin, but that name laced with a specific voice, Deku, couldn't help but smile. Finally, it was his time to shine. To meet his rival. He jolted towards him and punched him square in the face. Everything after that was fueled by excitement and adrenaline. Kachan was here, he had friends too. It made Deku's stomach churn with both joy and envy. He wasn't ready to confront his childhood friend, but it didn't stop from him making a monologue of his past. Deku was a chatterbox anyhow, so being able to finally give the world his backstory had excited him. It might have been the rush of excitement that stunted Deku's rational strategy. He had forgotten the friends that were with Kacchan, so when an ice barricade was built he grew annoyed. Kacchan and the others had made their way, and Deku had wearily announced his resentment to his previously favorite hero. He eventually left, watching as his sensei have his last fight with One for All. He landed next to Tamura in an unknown location with the rest of the villains, standing there, staring at him. Deku's first instincts were to go to Tamura. "Tomu-chan, are you alright?" He took a hold of his shoulder. Shigaraki Tamura would have slapped him away, but he remembered what his sensei told him. The boy would be key to their success. He had a suspicion that the boy was now brainwashed, having different memories implanted that showed Tamura as someone to be respected and cared for. Not only a few moments before was Tamura grabbing Deku's shoulder and making him cry in agony, destroying his skin. Now he was holding his shoulder, asking if he was alright. He grinned. "I'm fine, Izuku. We have to support Sensei now." They all looked around, turning to see a small TV against the wall. Unknown to either of them, the memories that Sensei had implanted into Izuku Midoriya had made Shigaraki Tamura seem like an older brother. It was obvious once someone thought about it. If Tamura were to be the successor of All for One and Izuku was the successor of One for All, then he wanted to parallel his own relationship with his brother. All the memories pointed towards Tamura as his friend. Someone who had given him hope when no one else was there. Whether Tamura liked that or not, he would soon find out that he himself needed someone like Izuku in his life. A younger apprentice who now shared the same drive. The boy that once looked up to All Might was now his, their goal the same. Snuff out the flames of the previous One for All. If they had met under different circumstances, would they have gotten alone? The artificial Tamura in Deku's memories was obviously designed to keep the illusion as realistic as possible, but the villain wondered how much if it would really be his responses and actions. It dawned on him that he might have actually liked Izuku, his drive and his intelligence if it wasn't for the boy's love and admiration for All Might. Now that the drive was destroyed and recreated, however, it meant that Tamura could use the boy the way he liked. Actually get along with him and he'll still follow Tamura around like a dog. The two of them had cried when they watched their sensei be taken away. Tamura was ready to throw a fit, a tantrum and destroy everything that was in that dark space. Kurogiri was ready to transport his hands away if he were to touch one of them, but Deku had come over and placed a hand on his shoulder once more, smiling through his tears. "It's your time, Tomu-chan," he told him. In that instant, Tamura almost took that smile to be a reminiscence of All Might, but came to realize that it was a smile from Izuku Midoriya's heart that made him actually calm down. He nodded. He was going to take down All Might. And his special weapon was standing willing next to him, ready to risk his life for him. Tamura was ready to destroy All Might and deny him everything. He couldn't wait to see the No. One hero's reaction to Deku taking all of the hits from all of the heroes to protect him. The despair that was coming was inevitable. After Kamino Ward, everyone had gone home with a piece of their hearts missing. All Might, also known as Toshinori Yagi, had stepped down as the No. One hero, the world discovering his true form. The school found it to be the best course of action to have all the students move into the dorms for better protection, and both All Might and Aizawa were making trips to the students' homes. Bakugo sat on the family's sofa next to his father as his mother went up to answer the door. He was quiet, a lot more quiet than usual, but both his parents understood why and didn't press him further. They knew their Katsuki was one to think at times like these, and the best action for them to take was to watch out for him and support him. "Thank you for having us." All Might's new voice sounded so much different. There wasn't any pep in his words, he sounded tired, groggy and old. Bakugo would have never said that out loud, but still, this man was his idol. Deku's idol as well. He looked up at him as both teachers took a seat. "We've told you ahead of time," Aizawa started gently. "We'd like to hear your answer and give insight on any questions you may have. We understand that these are difficult times and you'd rather prefer to be with your son. It's fine with us." Mitsuki, Bakugo's mother, grinned and slapped the backside of his son. Bakugo's face scrunched up. "Don't hit me, you hag." Another hit to the back of his head. "Respect your mother, you little shit." Both Toshinori and Aizawa blinked, feeling like they understood why Bakugo was the way he is. The bickering went on for a while, Masaru Bakugo trying to step in but with no results. Mitsuki turned back towards the teachers, her face softened. Considering everything that's happened, there really isn't any reason to not let our Katsuki stay with you. They told us that he was targeted by the villains and was nearly kidnapped. She left out the reason why he wasn't taken. If he's still in danger, well, what can me and my husband do? It was a truth that lingered over the two parents. We're not heroes, obviously. But our Katsuki is strong. Mr. Aizawa, I remember what you said about my son during one of his matches during the sports festival. He's not dumb, he's clever, careful, and driven. She laughed, placing a hand on her son's head. Everyone knows about what happened to Izuku in this neighborhood. She brought up the name that left everyone silent, frozen and in pain. This family still believes in you all, and we trust that you'll take care of our Katsuki and bring back Izuku. Her face was hopeful, a small smile reached them. Bakugo looked away. His mother had been school friends with Inko, before she got married and kept their friendship throughout Deku and Katsuki's childhood. It was probably the reason why the two boys were always around each other when they were younger. Mitsuki had once told him that while the boys were going to UA, Inko Midoriya had voiced her concerns to her and admitted she was scared that her son would continue to be harassed by Katsuki. She had lectured him about that and he begrudgingly had to admit that Izuku, Deku, Midoriya was no longer someone that could be pushed around. The Bakugos bowed their heads to the teachers, thanking them for their time and care. As All Might and Aizawa headed out, the young fiery boy ran out to stop them both. His heart felt heavy again, a hand gripping his chest as he looked All Might directly. "What is Deku to you?" he asked, recalling the moment he saw on the giant building screen. All throughout school, it seemed like All Might had taken an interest to Deku. On top of that, the sudden resurgence of Deku's quirk was far too suspicious to ever leave Bakugo's mind. He then remembered that Deku had told him that his quirk was gifted to him. Toshinori had stayed quiet. Aizawa took a look at the two of them and walked back into the car to give them privacy. "Bakugo, my boy. Young Midoriya told you that his newfound power was passed down, yes?" The man who was once the No. 1 pro hero turned towards Bakugo. He could only nod, not sure what to say about it. He could definitely infer some things. "I'm planning to tell everything to Midoriya's mother. If you'd like to come along, you're welcome to hear." Bakugo's eyes widened. The last time Katsuki Bakugo was inside the Midoriya's household was probably before middle school. He used to come inside often, but mostly accompanied by his own mother. He remembered Inko Midoriya bringing out a specific brand of cookies that she knew Bakugo loved. He recalled never saying thank you and being hit by his mother after woofing down two at a time. On the coffee table was a plate of those cookies and some tea, but the woman who was once known as Auntie to him wasn't smiling. Her face was red, blotted with tear stains. Inko's hair was a mess, her eyes sunken, swollen and tired. She probably hadn't eaten at all since the police told her what had happened to her son. Probably even before that. "Mrs. Midoriya, we understand the amount of worry, sadness and pain you are in." All Might's voice treaded lightly. The woman had begun pulling at the fabric of her skirt. "They told me to tell you that we are doing everything in our power to rescue your son, but as the previous No. 1 hero and Izuku's mentor, I promise you I will rescue him." Bakugo heard the essence of All Might's strength in his tone. Inko's face begun to scrunch up, tears streaming down the already beaten-out path. "It's your fault." Her voice was soft, but they both heard her clearly. Her eyes, though red and wet with tears, looked malicious. "I'm sorry, It's your fault." Inko screamed out, standing up abruptly. Both All Might and Bakugo were caught off guard, staying in their seats. "Izuku's always looked up to you, he's wanted to be you. To be a hero. When I found out he was quirkless, I was relieved. But then he gets a quirk and all of a sudden he's coming home nearly broken, his hands smashed and bruised and blood and it's all because of you." She spat harshly at All Might. Bakugo's eyes widened, feeling a hint of fear. Guilt. All Might only watched, face saddened. While Bakugo felt the verbal lashings to be out of hand, Toshinori Yagi understood that Inko was only attacking him because she was a mother. She needed something to blame. He knew this would happen and readied himself for every single punch to the gut. If only he didn't get his quirk, but I know even then he would have still tried to become a hero no matter what, but with the quirk he has now he became so destructive and now he's Toshinori got up and bowed his head. I'm the one that gave him his quirk. Inko and Bakugo's eyes widened, staring at him. The room had gone silent once again, Inko's sobbing had subsided. Her full attention was on the man. What? Bakugo didn't know how much time had passed. He didn't really understand what, one for all, but what really probed him in the back of his mind was the question, why Deku? His turmoil had to be set aside. If he were to get angry about Deku being the chosen one, then it was possible he would say more things he would regret. He might have said that Deku wasn't deserving, also something along the lines of how he should die. Not something he'd want to say in front of his worrying mother. He didn't know who would slap him first, All Might or Inko. Once everything was explained, another air of quietness had plagued the room. The amount of tension that built up during the last hour or so had thickened further. The silence broke with more sobbing. My son, Izuku, he's my world, he's my hero. I know that he's got the heart of a hero, but if he just didn't have a quirk he would have never been in this situation. Her voice rose again, tears and snot falling from her face. I know he wants to be a hero. I know that he wanted your gift, but as his mother I just can't stand this anymore. My heart can't take this, and now my boy is gone. Her wails struck chords into the two of them. Bakugo finally decided to speak up. Mrs. Midoriya, Bakugo was ready to reassure her, ready to convince her that Deku would be brought back to her safely. She cut him off, slicing his words with her own sharp retort. And you've always bullied him. You made him life a hell as a kid. Don't think I didn't know. Every day he came back with bruises and burn marks. You didn't think I knew. You were awful to him. And yet he saved you. Her voice wavered, the anger building. The frustration and utter hatred shone through the tears in her eyes, and Bakugo's chest ached. I'm not my son, so I can't understand why he would risk his entire life for someone like you. He truly is a hero, but I can't help think that it should have been you taken. Inko's words were bitter, malicious, and unapologetic. A mother's love treaded across any danger. Her love for her son shone the brightest in that moment. Toshinori opened his mouth to say something, anything to buffer the poison spewing from the mother's mouth, but Bakugo had stood up from his seat, storming over to Inko's side. The older man's heart jumped, his mind immediately went to the worse. If Aizawa hadn't chosen to stay in the car for this meeting, then he was sure the young boy would be wrapped in bandages and pulled back. Bakugo don't. The boy fell to his knees, placed his hands in front of him, and bowed his head to the ground in front of her. I'm sorry. Silence again. I know I'm a fucking asshole and I know what I did to Deku was wrong, but I swear to you I'm going to save him, and it's not because I'm aiming to be a hero, but it's because I owe it to your goddamn son. He couldn't stop himself from cursing in front of the mother. His nose was to the floor, no one could see the tears rolling down his nose alongside the clenched teeth holding back his cries. I swear I'll get him back for you. He screamed into the carpet. Toshinori stood there for a moment, dumbstruck by the usually prideful boy's actions. He got to his knees, bowing in front of the woman himself. We will rescue Izuku Midoriya with any means necessary, even if I have to give up my life. The once hero poured from his heart. Inko could only stagger, falling to her own knees in front of them. She wrapped her arms around them and continued crying, wailing loudly. Bakugo heard her muttered apologizes, begging them both for forgiveness and to bring her son home to her. He also heard her whisper, "Please, all of you come back alive." They both nodded their heads. The move to the dorms was difficult for everyone. Many of them would have been excited if it wasn't for the fact there was someone missing. What was worse, that this so-called missing student was not actually missing. He was with the villains now. The very idea of Izuku Midoriya as a villain upset his classmates, and the terror and hurt they felt rivaled the outcome of him being dead instead. If Deku knew what was happening to him right now, how would he take to that? Once they got him back, they would ask him that. They all waited for the day they could laugh about this. But a few of them refused to just wait. The class had organized a room judging competition that a few of them didn't participate in. Bakugo wasn't going to give them the pleasure of breaking into his room, tearing through his armor and finding his inner feelings. It was just a room, but it was his room that was his haven. He avoided participating in the competition by feigning fatigue, pretending to be asleep in his room. The competition was something to distract everyone from the worry and gloomy atmosphere, it was too obvious. Everyone's laughter and smiles were bittersweet, but it was the best they can do during these hard times. Once night fell and everyone went to their rooms, Bakugo went out of his room and began exploring his new living quarters. He needed to know how the kitchen worked so he could make his goddamn food as well as where the different exits so he could walk out to train. Before he walked into the common place, he stopped, hearing voices. He stood in the hallway, listening to see who they were. Probably that Kirishima and Kaminari idiot eating late at night. They seemed like those kind of people. He didn't recognize us. Do you think they erased those memories permanently? Shit, that was Iida. If it's a quirk, I doubt that it is permanent. We just need to learn what kind of memory-altering quirk it is and what possible ways that can stop its affect. The calm voice was Todoroki's. Right as always, Todoroki. The optimism in his voice wasn't as it used to be. I just can't believe this. Our Midoriya, a villain. I know. It goes against everything he is. A sigh followed. Todoroki, did you know about his past? When he was shouting at Bakugo, he never told me anything about his relationship with him. I always assumed they were strained friends thrown into competitive rivalry. Bakugo winced at his name being mentioned. No. Considering everything I told him about my life, I didn't know anything about him other than what he made public to the whole class. Bakugo couldn't see, but he felt Iida nodding his head. The silence in the air was calm. There was a cricket chirping outside the kitchen's window. Iida spoke up again, gently with caution. I knew Bakugo was vicious, but I never thought he'd tell someone to, you know. A nod from Todoroki was a reply, but nothing more. Iida continued. Midoriya is truly a hero. He said he was alone before, with no friends and only Bakugo telling him to kill himself. But even so he saved him. Bakugo listened, his knuckles growing white from being clenched so tightly. He heard Iida's voice shake. A sob escaped Iida's mouth, causing Todoroki to turn to him in surprise. Iida's head was low, leaning forward on the sofa. Tears fell onto the floor. We couldn't save him, he was right in front of us and we left him. His voice quivered as Todoroki shifted closer, placing a hand onto his back. We couldn't get him that time, but we will. He's still alive, Iida. If it was any of us, we both know Midoriya would try again and again for us. Iida leaned back on the sofa, rubbing Iida's back. You're right. We'll save him, even if it takes the rest of my life. Iida's hand went up, wiping away his tears. Bakugo turned away from the hallway, heading back up to his room. That stupid brat, if he didn't have one for all, Bakugo would assume Deku's quirk was something like friendship building. It almost seemed like every person he comes into contact with becomes friends with him. Not just friends, but he's built all these strong, mutual relationships. From round face to four eyes to half-half, not just them but everyone else in class seemed to revolve around Deku's enigma. His personality was bright, something that drew everyone to him. When he got into his room, Bakugo was ready to smash his fist into the wall. He stopped himself, knowing that Kirishima next door would wake up and run over to his dorm to check on him. Bakugo didn't want any of that, he just wanted to be left alone and wallow in his suffering. The pain and suffering that he deserved. Having the green-haired boy around felt awkward. In a span of an hour or so, the boy he deemed to be a nuisance just itching to die was now his right-hand man. Tamura Shigaraki wasn't sure how the manipulation and mind bend work. He assumed that new memories were placed into Izuku's head, but from how far back and what were the memories even? On top of that, how long of an effect would this be? Tamura had no one to ask as the one man that knew the answers to everything had been locked away. Honestly, he was really interested to know the extents of the altered memories. He understood that the boy had been taken in by Sensei alongside Tamura. Okay. That was all he knew. Tamura didn't own any memories of the younger boy and what kind of relationship they had. While he should have been treading carefully, making sure nothing sounded too odd that might have broken the quirk's effects, the tired man wanted to know just how brainwashed Izuku Midoriya really is. The boy was sitting on a stool, talking with Kurogiri. He seemed to trust him enough to talk as much as he was now, explaining to the bartender about what had happened and how Sensei's plan for the league was to wait and regroup. Kurogiri, despite not having a face, seemed to be enjoying his talk with the young man. It was a break from the man-child he had to babysit, that's for sure. Tamura stumbled over to the two, swiftly reaching out his hand to grab at Izuku's throat. While talking, the younger boy threw his own arm up to block Tamura's reach. He then grabbed his wrist and pulled it back. Sorry Kurogiri. Tomu-chan, what's up? Izuku turned to look at him, his eyes weren't laced with fear, just puzzlement. Tamura had decided to attack the boy out of nowhere, but Izuku treated it like nothing at all. Was this something that occurred before in Izuku's implanted memories? Despite the action being extremely unpredictable, he frowned, pulling his hand back. Stop talking to Kurogiri. Actually, the villain didn't care about whether or not someone talked to the bartender. He needed an excuse for his outburst. Izuku only smiled at him, warmly. Kindly. Hey, I know you're frustrated right now, Tamura raised an eyebrow. But let's not get so feisty, okay? We're discussing what to do from here on out. Izuku explained, turning back to Kurogiri. The bartender chuckled, causing Tamura to huff in annoyance and send the man a glare. So like I was saying, the best course of action is to rally up more villains into the league. Doesn't matter if they're small or large. We need numbers right now. All Might has retired, right? But he's still a beacon of hope to everyone. People are going to think that we're going to lay low now that our leader is gone, but that won't be the case. Izuku turned towards Tamura. You're going to be leading us now, so what do you think? It caught Tamura off guard. His hands began moving towards his neck to scratch in annoyance but was stopped by Izuku. He took a hold of his hands before he began tearing at his neck. He looked at him, concerned. You gotta stop doing that. We don't have Sensei around to heal you if it gets really bad. He explained. Shit. Izuku was right about that. Sometimes when it got too bad, the wounds stung and irritated Tamura even more. They'd have to get Sensei's help. Already, Izuku was acting like a picture-perfect advisor. He knew Tamura enough to stop him from self-destructing but still respected him enough as his leader to ask his opinion. How the fuck was this the same hero brat from before? Listen, mop head, the best insult he could think of at the moment. I don't want to bring in some stupid criminals who don't know our greater goal. Plus, they'll think that they're better than us and it'll piss me off. His fingers twitched, wanting to really touch something now. Izuku only nodded. You're right about that. Low criminals will be a hassle to control, but at the moment we only have a few members. He nudged his head at the door that led to the common room. Izuku didn't know any of their names and referred to them as the others. Tamura assumed that the only people he actually knew was him and Kurogiri. But don't think of them as actual members, think of them as stepping stones. Disposable. Izuku grinned. His face was twisted, something that even Tamura felt weird to see on the boy. We'll just gather a bunch for an assault and let them die. I think we should target UA. Tamura raised an eyebrow, looking from him to Kurogiri. Izuku, why UA? We know it'll be heavily guarded now. Kurogiri spoke up, placing some of the cups he was polishing down. Even if they weren't in a bar, it was a habit he couldn't break. Well, if you think of it, it might be the easiest way to go to destroy the hope for the future. Those students are still kids, they're not pros yet even if they have some experience under their belts. If we get rid of them, there won't be any future heroes raised in time to worry about. Then we get rid of the actual pro heroes. I'm sure they'd feel an amount of despair not being able to protect some kids, don't you think? The logic was there. The plan was, of course, risky and had to be thought out better, but the outline Izuku had sketched out began sinking in both Tamura's and Kurogiri's mind. Listen, Tomu-chan, it's your decision, but when you're fighting a stage in the video game, do you go right to the boss? Or get rid of all the underlings first? Shit, he even knew to make game references. It became clear that whatever Sensei did to the boy's mind, it was phenomenal. We'll think about it, Tamura replied, frowning still. Kurogiri looked to Izuku. I believe it's an excellent strategy. Before then, I'd advise you to go meet the newest members of the league and familiarize yourself with their quirks and personality. We'll make a strategy. This made the boy beam brightly. Izuku hopped off the stool he was sitting on and headed towards the door. Thanks, Kurogiri. And while we're on the subject, I think it's fair to say I'm suggesting this plan on UA because, well, Izuku's face began to flush with embarrassment as he rubbed the back of his head. There's someone I really want to kill there. He almost laughed it out before heading through the door to meet the other villains. Kurogiri turned to Tamura, placing his hands down on the table. He makes a good point. Though he doesn't understand the predicament he's in, it's more than likely that the hero's course of action is going to be rescuing Izuku. Tamura began scratching his neck again. The boy is bloodthirsty now, so he'd want to fight them. However, I find this risky as we still don't know how the quirk's ability can be dispelled. If he were to face his former friends, they might be able to find a way to break through to him. Tamura scratched harder. Shigaraki, what do you want to do? Tamura began to scratch harder and stopped. Remember Izuku's touch. He would probably get mad if he started bleeding. He placed his hand down. We don't know shit about what Sensei did to him, but I don't think it's something that can be easily fixed. Sensei's smarter than that. If he wants to fight we should let him. Tamura huffed angrily, his fingers itching to scratch his own skin. As you wish. Kurogiri turned towards the door. Tamura turned too, walking towards it. He's ours now. There's no way that any of those brats can bring him back with their dumb power of friendship or whatever. I'm actually getting excited imagining the horrors on their face when Izuku kills one of them. Tamura smirked. If they were to get Izuku to UA and slaughter one of those twerps, it would land a heavy toll on all of them. Even if Izuku were to snap out of his hold and be returned, their lives would never be the same. The idea was picture perfect, except for the fact Tamura didn't want Izuku to leave the league. He was the missing piece that they needed for success. The heroes can't have him back. Izuku Midoriya did not have a villain name. At first when he considered using the name, Deku, it only made him angry enough to demolish an interior wall. The implications of the name would never change, it was always an insult to him that meant, the one who can't do anything. He always wondered if his parents were aware when they chose the name for him. He was better off going by his last name which was basic enough. As his hair was green and it made enough sense. But even that name left a bitterness in his mouth. It was a family name and he didn't know if it was because he resented his parents for abandoning him or wanted to spare their feelings. After all, his parents weren't awful, they just weren't there for him. He wondered what might have happened if his mother stayed at home, with him. Maybe he wouldn't have felt the need to disappear that day. He had met all of the villains in the common area and wrote down their quirks and personalities in his notebook when they weren't looking. That was something Izuku never stopped doing throughout his life. When Sensei had found him and nurtured Izuku back to health, his notebook was presented to him with compliments and praises. Sensei found it on the ground close to where Izuku had fallen and went through every single page. How did he even read it? Maybe Tamura told him. Izuku was encouraged to keep writing, causing the boy to cry at the time. All of the quirks he learned just now had given him an idea for a strategy, but he would need to write them down in a separate notebook and run some simulations. There was data missing, the hero course's quirks. For some reason, Izuku felt like he had written every student's quirks and abilities down beforehand. It was confusing since he didn't know anything about the class except that Kachan had been enrolled and placed in that specific class. Maybe it was because he saw the sports festival. That should be it, he needed to see some reruns of the UA Sport Festival to compile a new notebook for a new strategy against the UA kids. Izukun. Himiko Toga began pulling at his sleeve, a hand to her face. She was blushing madly, her wild smile was a comfort to Izuku actually. The other villains looked at her, ready to stop her from saying anything that could give away some important information. Yes Toga-chan. Izuku flashed a small smile to her. She nearly squealed. I think you're so cool. You seem to be thinking really hard. What are you thinking of? A strategy. She started rambling as Dabi walked over, frowning. Leave him alone, we need to get ready for what he's planning. He interrupted, making Toga pout in response. Dabi turned to stare at the boy, his face full of admiration and respect. Both Toga and him were taken by the boy, thought the latter wouldn't admit it as openly as the girl. Izuku laughed, as the door opened. Both Tamura and Kurogiri walked into the room as the villains watched. Ah, Tomu-chan, what did you decide? Izuku asked, pulling out his notebook and a ballpoint pen. Tamura licked his chapped lips, moving a hand into his pocket to retrieve his father, placing it onto his face. We're going with your plan, Izuku. Congrats. The last part felt like friendly sarcasm, at least to Izuku. Great. If I can, I want to get more information on the hero course students at UA. They may still be children, but they know their strengths and are still heroes in training regardless. I was thinking I could watch some reruns of the school sports festival. A few fingers twitched from Tamura before Kurogiri walked over. Izuku, I don't believe that's wise. A hand was placed on the boy's shoulder. Why's that? I know some of the students' quirks, especially the ones that are from well-renowned families, but if I check the footage from the sports festival I can write up an entire spreadsheet. Izuku explained, opening up his notebook. That's not what I meant. The footage from the sports festival is limited and unreliable. The students have grown tremendously since then, and I would advise you do current research on these students and their quirks. Kurogiri took into account that if Izuku were to check the sports festival footage he would definitely see himself. Whether that would confuse him or break the manipulation altogether, it was something to avoid. Kurogiri, you're so right. Izuku's hands went to his face. How could I be so dumb? Does that mean I get permission to do some spying? His heart leapt. His dream of going to UA was going to be realized. Though in a different way. The bartender looked to Tamura to see his opinion on it. Tamura only grumbled and reached to Izuku, wrapping 4 fingers around his throat. Izuku didn't flinch, or even seem to mind. His smile stayed. Fine, but don't get yourself caught. If someone sees you, kill them. The orders were out. Izuku's face shone, a grin spreading from ear to ear. Both Toga and Dabi were assigned to go with Izuku as he surveyed the dorm buildings. They weren't ready for actual spying and researching on quirks just yet, it was a precursor before the actual investigations. They needed to know the layout of the dormitory, every single nook and cranny, as well as where all the security surveillances were. Izuku wouldn't know, but the 2 other villains were there to keep Izuku in check. If something were to happen that jeopardized his brainwash, they would take him back immediately. Izuku, on the other hand, felt that Toga was there as a precaution. If they were to be caught, Toga would use the blood she had gotten from Izuku willingly to transform into him. It would throw the heroes off and the real Izuku would make his escape. Dabi was insurance. His quirk could destroy the entire building really, as well as the forest surrounding them. While Izuku wasn't too happy to be playing babysitter at the moment, it was still true that 3 heads were better than 1. We're only on a survey mission, so really study this layout, okay? Find as many cameras as you can, mark and note them. We'll split up and meet back here in 10, got it? He gave the orders out to the 2 of them before they dispersed. Toga had used her quirk to transform into a civilian whose blood she took earlier in the day. She would circle the perimeter on foot to see how close they could be without hitting any red zones. Dabi would stay close to the meet-up point, watching the dorms from the front. If Izuku gave him the signal, he would spread his dark fire at the opening of the dorms to prevent anyone from leaving as they made their escape. That was only if they needed to get away, if the mission had gone haywire. Izuku himself was too happy about the mission. Even though it was just the dormitories and not the actual school, Izuku felt like he could cry in happiness to be on campus one way or another. This could have been his at one point. What caught Izuku's eyes was the track field and battleground they had added close to the dorms. Of course there was the actual field near the classrooms, but they must have thought it would be rewarding to have some of the outdoor training facilities near the dormitories. This school could really spend some money. He took note of the size and how far away it was from the dorms versus the entrance. He watched on top of a tree branch, using his fingers to mark distances between buildings. He made notes, both mentally and physically, about the area. It seemed like it would be a good place to lure the students, as the outdoor field was on the side of the dormitories. They could block the way to the front and back entrances, leaving them on the field facing a forest. Out of the corner of Izuku's eye, he watched as a student walked across the field and sat down in the middle, legs crossed. Squinting, Izuku couldn't help but wonder what idiot kid would want to wander into the cold night when there was danger amiss. The whole point of the dorms was so that the kids could be rounded up and watched over. Here was someone, willingly leaving that protection. It almost made Izuku want to kill whoever it was. A flash of white and red finally settled in Izuku's vision. He grinned. Shoto Todoroki was out by himself, middle of the night, doing what? Meditating. What a loser. He only knew about the boy through his father. Endeavor, now the no. One pro hero. Shoto himself had acquired part of his father's quirk as well as an ice quirk. He remembered that much when Izuku saw him for the first time at Kamino Ward. With a dual quirk like that, it seemed that he would be the biggest threat to the league. Izuku's hand twitched, moving towards his belt to grab a knife. He wanted to know more about the boy, his quirk and his background. There was something intriguing about the boy. Maybe it was the scar that blotted itself onto his face. Maybe it was the fact that both his eyes were closed, his chest rising and falling as he breathed in the air. He could have taken him by surprise easily. Throw a few knives, pin him down, steal him, torture him for information, the usual things. Izuku had to stop those thoughts, knowing he had to stick to the plan he himself had created. But, when would something like this be placed in front of him again? Something so nicely wrapped up and presented to him. A hand was raised, the knife was positioned. He aimed for the boy's palms. As Izuku's arm fell to throw, he stopped suddenly. His arm quivered, refusing to let go of the knife he had in his hands. Something was compelling him to stop, something that didn't feel like him. Fuck. Was it a quirk? Who was there? Izuku quickly moved his other arm and then placed his armed hand down to his side. Huh. Izuku quickly looked everywhere, scanning for any heroes ready to fight him. No one was around. Maybe it was intuition that stopped Izuku from throwing the knife. It might be the logical, rational side to Izuku's brain that told him stop. Don't do it. You're only here to survey the area, dummy. He sighed. Izuku was letting his bloodlust get the better of him. He sat on the branch and watched the boy for a while longer before heading to the other side to scan the other side of the dormitory. Everything was easy to draw out. It was exactly what a dormitory should look like, so whatever interior rooms Izuku couldn't see, he could at least map out and infer the inside. He was also able to match some of the dorm rooms to a student based on balcony alone. Izuku had a list compiled of every Class 1A student's name and picture. Some of the balconies screamed out who their owner was. Honestly, pathetic, ignorant. There wasn't any time to dress up a room when you know that there are still villains out there, after you. You don't want to announce to the world that you were living there. He'd have to frown at the leopard throw blanket hanging on the balcony of a dorm. It was probably Mina Ishido's, he was very certain about it. As Izuku headed back to the rendezvous point, he took a quick glance over to the field again, seeing if Todoroki was still there. He was, sitting in the same position he was in the first time Izuku saw him. The difference was that he was muttering something. Izuku might have seen the glimmer of a tear in his eye before leaving with Togo and Dabi back to the villain's base. For some unknown reason, it made Izuku want to cry as well.